Comme ça, c'est bien. Très bien, il y a encore des places ici pour ceux qui veulent. Voilà, donc.
Et sur OK. Ah non, ça se voit plus.
Non, c'est pas grave. C'est pas grave. Il y a encore des places devant, si vous voulez. Très bien, donc il est l'heure. Bienvenue à tous. C'est un très grand plaisir pour moi d'être le chairman de cette session, de ce colloquium, ou quatrième partie du petit séjour d'Alfio pour ces leçons dans le cadre des leçons Jacques-Louis. Donc, je connais Alfio depuis 1979, il y a quand même pas mal de temps. Donc, Alfio est un ami du laboratoire d'analyse numérique et du laboratoire Jacques-Louis. Et donc, on a beaucoup travaillé ensemble à cette époque-là. Donc, Alfio, vous le connaissez, il est professeur à l'EPFL, il est professeur au Politecnico di Milano. En fait, il a eu 2 ou 3 vies en parallèle parce que les équipes à l'EPFL et au Polytechnico sont des équipes à part entière qu'il a animées avec beaucoup d'étudiants. Il a eu une 60aine d'étudiants, je crois. C'est à peu près l'ordre de grandeur. Ce qui est remarquable, à mon avis, et qui s'est exprimé dans ces leçons-là, c'est l'esprit de synthèse qu'Alfio a, en plus de toute l'activité qui a été reconnue par des prix scientifiques, par des conférences au plus haut niveau. Et c'est l'esprit de synthèse qu'on a pu voir pendant ces cours-là. Esprit de synthèse qui se voit aussi sur le nombre de livres qu'il a produits. Je crois que tu as produit 24 livres, quelque chose comme ça, plus qu'il faut éditer 12 livres, donc à chaque fois sur les sujets sur lesquels il a pu travailler, allant des méthodes spectrales aux méthodes de décomposition de domaine, les méthodes de base réduite, l'analyse du cœur, la simulation du cœur. Et je pense qu'il y en aura encore d'autres, les contributions. Donc cet esprit de synthèse se voit dans ces livres-là qui sont des très grands succès et qui sont recommandés par tous les spécialistes du sujet. Donc, c'est un très grand plaisir pour nous de t'avoir eu pendant cette semaine. Merci Alfio, et je vais te laisser la parole sur The Pulse of Math.
Merci beaucoup Yvon, pour cette présentation très généreuse. C'est bien sûr un plaisir, un honneur d'être ici. C'est toujours c'est ma deuxième maison finalement, scientifique. J'ai aussi le plaisir de voir beaucoup d'amis ici. Donc, c'est toujours un grand plaisir de revenir. Cela étant dit, je vais faire mon truc en anglais parce qu'il y a un peu de mots trop techniques qui sont sortis dernièrement et je veux être sûr de les dire correctement. Donc, this is the title of the talk. And as you can guess, my talk will revolve around the simulation of the heart. And I will take the opportunity of talking about this specific application, which is a very complex application, to broaden a little bit my view and to consider different aspects that are relevant for modeling, for numerical simulation, and for applications. So the picture or the view of my talk is this one, and this is a very general one actually. So we are in a context where we want to address a physical problem. Physical here means everything. It could be from physics, from engineering, from medicine, from other fields of applications. We have 2 branches. One, which is the left-hand branch, which is the one we are more used to, and it consists of developing a mathematical model, typically based on partial differential equations, not necessarily, but most often PDEs, say. And then, since those equations, you cannot solve them by paper and pencil, you have to resort to numerical methods. that they call it generically model numeric, so digital models, right? And eventually get your solution. So this is one track. And then more recently, you know that there's another possible track, namely to use data and to invest on data and to build upon data. And this will eventually lead to machine learning algorithms and data-driven methods. So the two things can be regarded as alternatives, but in fact, there is a lot of opportunity when you try to combine. And this is a new field that is sometimes called machine learning. So I will try to give you some elements of knowledge in this field. And also I will conclude by mentioning the application to digital twins, which is often a very badly understood concept, actually, even from people who are considered to be the expert in the field, say. And I'll try to explain why digital twin is indeed a very important tool for simulation and control of complex problems. So this is the picture or the orientation, as Jacques-Louis D, right? And so I start with digital models. And my digital model is for the heart, as I was saying before. So of course, I'll be extremely quick here because otherwise it will take forever, but just to give you an idea of what the heart is, or actually what the heart functioning is. The heart is an organ, and then we are but this pumping action is only one aspect, final aspect of the heart function. Indeed, you start from an electrical stimuli that is induced spontaneously in a specific point of the heart. It's called the symmetrical node, where you have exciting cells, like kinds of natural pacemakers, say, and then with the propagation of electrical field, first to the upper part of the heart, it's called atria, and then to the lower part of the heart, which is called ventricle. This electrical field will impact the activity of every cell in the heart, so the cardiomyocytes, and those cells will be opening their channels, and through those channels there will be ions that go back and forth, and this will create a transmembrane potential. The membrane is the membrane of the cell. So you have a transmembrane potential, electric potential, and this will be responsible to generate a force, which is purely induced by electricity. So this is called the active force or the active tension that occurs on every single cell. So you can imagine a single cell as being a one-dimensional object. Of course, it's not true, it's three-dimensional object, but just to simplify your mind, right? And so it will relax and contract due to this active force. And the global aggregation of this relaxation and contraction will determine the contraction and dilation of the whole organ, the heart. So you have the electricity, the biochemical dynamics at the cell level. You have the formation of this force, the contractive force at the cell, and then and all this is called electrophysiology. And then you have the global mechanics, mechanical deformation. So this is a mechanical problem. And then you have the fluid dynamics, because you have blood inside the atria and the valves, and blood is subject to this type of action. And then you have the myocardial perfusion, because you have coronaries that will feed the organ itself, the muscle itself, right, to bring oxygen to the whole tissue. And you have the propagation through the torso of this electric potential to generate the electrocardiogram, the one that you measure when you go to the hospital. And then you have the connection with the external circulation. And again, you have the dynamics of the valves. So all this is the conceptual model of the heart. And every block is representing a specific kind of physics. That's why we call it multi-physics. And every block is connected with a neighboring block, say, through the propagation to the exchange of information of physical quantity. So it's a coupled problem. So it's a non-linearly coupled multi-physics problem. Okay, this is conceptual. And now we have to put equations, to have equation to feed all these blocks. And this is where modeling enters into play. So again, this is a very long story, but we'll try to give you only very quickly say the basic detail. First of all, you have to start from the cells. And this is the microscopic scale, right? And the cell, in every cell that you can think as pointwise entities, you have a dynamics in time of this ion species of calcium, potassium, phosphorus, and so on and so on, and so forth. So you have a system of ordered differential equations at the cell, every single cell. And those quantities here, for instance, W is the concentration of every single species, and Z is the state of opening or closing of the channels, right? So Z is the probability of a channel to be open or closed. Z equal to 1, the channel is open. Z equal to 0, the channel is closed. So we have this system of equations which very often are phenomenological, which means that there is not a physical theory or say a fundamental law of nature that describes this behavior. So those equations are derived by observation typically. And that's why you have so many models, so many phenomenological models to describe the dynamics of every single cell. So that's the very first stuff. Now every cell is subject to the, you see the electrical impulse. This is T, the time in milliseconds. You go from 0 to 800 milliseconds, which is roughly speaking the heartbeat, the time for a heartbeat for an healthy heart, say. And the black part is the so-called action potential. This is V. V means potential. The volt. This is millivolt actually. This is transfer bearing potential. And as you see, you go from polarization to depolarization to an early depolarization and then to the steady state. And this occurs in the very first, you see, 100 milliseconds. So this is a characteristic time. That's very important to dictate the dynamics of the cells. So there's the very first model. The second model is that you want to go from the cell level to the organ level. So you go from the micro to the microscopic to the macroscopic. You need homogenization, and you derive these equations that are a system of reaction diffusion equations for the intracellular and extracellular potential. So as you can recognize here, you have, apart from these quantities that, of course, are characteristic quantity for every single person, you have the time derivatives of the potential minus the divergence of a suitable, say, diffusion tensor multiplied by the second order term. We know linear quantities here that are representative of the map between a reference state and the current state. And plus you have a zero order term, a source term, which is nonlinear, where the ionic activity that I was described before entering. So this is coupled to the microscopic level. So macroscopic globally coupled to the microscopic. And so I have two equations. One describes the intracellular and the other the extracellular equation. And this is the typical representation of the solution of those equations, the way the electric potential will propagate through the equation, say. Then I was saying before, at every single cell, you have the creation of a force, an active force. And this active force, you find it by solving other Fourier differential equations. Again, a cell is a point in the system. So here we describe the dynamics of the deformation of the cell. S is the, say, stretching of the cell, basically. And this depends non-linearly on many different things, in particular for the concentrations of the iron species, in particular for the calcium. The calcium is the big trigger of relaxation and contraction of the cells. So you have this equation, you have the generation of a Cauchy stress for the active force that we call P act, act stands for active, and this in turn will depend on the direction of the fibers of the cardiomyocyte, or the fibers in the heart. And again, this orientation is typical of a single patient. So this is, again, at the microscopic level, and then you go to the macroscopic level. You have the contraction and relaxation of the whole heart, and you find the classical elastodynamic equation. You have a Cauchy stress, which is nonlinear. You derive from an energy density function, and here we are assuming that the model is orthotropic, hyperelastic, and use different type of constitutive laws that go under different names. And we are assuming that the muscle is nearly incompressible because of the presence of the, say, fluid water into the matters. So this is the big stuff, and you see when you solve the electromechanics, namely the electrophysiology plus the mechanics, you can have your heart deforming. Here you see a view of the left ventricle and the right ventricle, and those cavities here are those actually typically covered by the presence of the valves. We are missing the boundary conditions. You do not the boundary conditions. I mean, very often you miss data here, and you don't have boundary conditions. The external boundary of the heart is the so-called pericardium, and here is where the boundary conditions that keep into consideration the presence of the external tissue. External tissue could be bone or soft tissue, and so we have a system. This is a non-standard equation, no standard boundary condition that we use, and we try to use springs to reflect the presence of the different stiffness of the surrounding tissue. We need to connect this with external circulation. The external circulation is the one that takes place into the whole circulatory system, and here you have thousands of large arteries and billions of capillaries. So you cannot use three-dimensional analysis for that, and this will be out of reach. So that's why we use zero-dimensional analysis. I mean, you just use only differential equations and use the analogy with electrical circuits. So you represent the external circulation by an analogy with electrical circuits, which means that you see resistance and compliance, and it's the classical element that we use when you use electrical system to describe, of course, a macroscopic system like this one. So you use the analogy with electricity in order to describe, you see the pressure, the flow rate, the chamber volume, the external circulation. So in this way, you are connecting the heart with the external circulation, and then you need the fluid dynamics. The fluid dynamics is the blood flow in the four cavities. Here you see one of those. This is the left atrium. We use classical Navier-Stokes equations for incompressible viscous fluids in a moving domain. So we use this so-called arbitrary Lagrange-Eulerian formulation. Then we have an S unknown. The S unknown is the one that gives us the volume, the moving volume at every time, right? So we have an extra equation that provides this extra quantity. So this is the classical system of Navier-Stokes equations. Of course, the blood is not turbulent in a physiological regime, but is always in transition toward turbulence. So you need turbulent models in order to make sure that you are represented correctly. We have valves, and the valves are represented here by extra terms into the Navier-Stokes momentum equations. We have this extra term, which is called resistance, and this resistance is a kind of sum of a delta Dirac function that are concentrated on the leaflet of the valves. So this is the coupled system, and if you solve this coupled system, it's coupled with the electromechanic system, you can describe now the complete heart behavior, as you see in this picture. This is the left heart. Of course, you can also then you will see some simulation of the global heart. I mentioned before the perfusion. The perfusion is the process by which the coronaries feed the myocardium. Typically, at the clinical level, you only see the big coronaries. These are about a dozen coronaries, those whose diameter is higher than 1 millimeter. With the current technology, you cannot go beyond this. So what we have been doing is been generating mathematically a system of ramification of coronaries, and we count almost 80,000 here, and use a system for the perfusion, a system which is based on Darcy equations for porous media. And actually, in any point, we consider three different scales: the microscopic, the mesoscopic, and the macroscopic. So three different scales are coexisting in the same point. So we derive those equations, and then we can exhibit, say, the perfusion of the whole system. I guess the last point is how you propagate information from the heart to the periphery, to the chest, say, and here we solve equations of propagation of electrical fields. In this way, we can generate numerically, artificially, mathematically, ECG, and compare this ECG, which are, say, computed numerically, with the actual ECG, and this is very useful to make parameter identification, for instance, or find those parameters that are not available otherwise, that will not be available otherwise. So in summarizing, this is the art model, right? We have all the boxes here, and every box contains the equations for all the physical processes that we have seen before. Okay, so if you can solve this Monster problem, then you're done. You have your virtual art. Of course, you need the numerics, and I don't have time to discuss the numerics, but just to give you some keywords, we use finite elements of arbitrary degree. We use meshes that are both isohedral and tetrahedral. We use finite difference synchronizing time of order up to 3, say with numerical quadrature, which are based on Gaussian quadratures in order to have an accurate representation of the integrals. You have grids of completely different kind for the myocardium and for the cavities. So we need some intergrid interpolation, going from one grid to the other without losing the energy. We need to solve a couple problem, and you cannot solve it in a single shot because that should be too big. So you have to partition it into sub-problems with the physical independent physical processes. Of course, you pay a price for that. You have to stabilize your numerical algorithm, otherwise you get unstable. Then you need to linearize, and you have different techniques to linearize, and then you have to solve the algebraic system in the very end, and we typically use parallel preconditioners. So these are big say work, but just synthesizing it in a very few highlights. So once you have this, what you do with that? So this is until now is the let's say the mathematical pleasure, if you can call it like this, actually is a tour de force. But what are you going to do with that? What is the ambitious? Well, the ambitious is moving toward digital health. What do I mean by that? Well, from one side, I want to use it to have a better description of the physiology, the human physiology, the one that doctors believe to know very well, which is not necessarily the case, right? And the second one is to address pathological situations. And actually all our validation is done starting from specific pathologies that are brought to us by doctors, and then we try to validate our model on those specific pathologies. So if you stand on the first side, say physiology, here you can see the way the model works. This is for the electrophysiology, the propagation of the electric potential in a healthy heart of a 20-year-old American boy. So you go, this is the univolt, this is the extracellular potential. You go from -80 to +40 in the ventricle. This is the frontal propagation of the electrical field. And this is what doctor recognize actually. This is the so-called activation map. So this is what arithmologists know or use, is this map. And this map tells you that if you take say, one isoline here, this isoline is the one that connect points that are electrically activated at the same time. So doctors, when they look at this map, they can see whether or not this heart is working properly from the electrical point of view, just one, okay? And here, of course, you have a 3D representation with quantitative values and of course, better representation than the one that doctors use. This generation of the active force at the cell level, at the cardiomyocyte, this is in kilopascal, is the so-called active tension. And you see now the heart, this is just a cross-section. This is the heart on the external side. And of course, this image is not available at the clinical level. There's nothing like this that would be available. This is the deformation of the whole heart. This is a displacement in meters. So we go from 0 to 2 centimeters, say, and the heart of an adult has a diameter which is on the order of 8 centimeters. So this is 25%. The largest deformation is 25%, so a big deformation. Right? It's a regime of big deformation. So for those who are completely unaware of that, this is the left heart, the one that we have on our left, say, is the right heart. This is a big artery that take venous blood and bring to the lungs to release CO2 and to intake oxygen, which is then brought back to the heart by 4 arteries or pulmonary veins. So the oxygenated heart enters into the atrium, the left atrium, which is hidden here, and then it passes through the left ventricle. And when this squeezes, say, the blood is ejected into the main organ. We'll see it, guess now when you have a fluid dynamics picture here. All right. So this you see the fluid, here you see the fluid dynamics. So you have the valves, right? And here you see this is a presentation of velocity magnitude. We go from 0 to 1.4 meter per second, just to give you an idea. So here you see the heart beating and with the internal view of the fluid dynamics. And I was saying before that the blood is not turbulent in an healthy person, but as you see here in the left heart, you have this very highly structured vorticity, which is typical of a fluid that is in a transient regime toward turbulence. So that's why you need very good models to catch all this, say, potentially turbulent problems. So far, so good. But of course, I mean, there are some limitations. But from a mathematical point of view, we can be satisfied because the results have been to some extent certified, so they are correct. Which is not easy at all to get result that are also quantitatively correct. But there are many issues. The first one is that this is an extremely demanding computation. I was saying in these past days that to simulate a heartbeat, so 1 second of real time takes on the order of 4 hours on a big supercomputer with more than 1,000 processors. There is a multi-scale space. We go from the molecular to the cellular to the tissue to the organ, and in time we go to the cell levels where we have the action potential to the heartbeat, and we have variability. I mean, if you want to address, you have to go to simulations for many people. Of course, every person has a heart, which is different from everyone else's heart, right? And then you have uncertainty because everything is uncertain here, starting from the clinical images, so the clinical information, and you want to see the way this uncertainty propagates into the results. You don't have initial conditions. You don't have boundary conditions, which is a big deal for PE guys, right? So you have to find initial conditions and boundary conditions in a consistent way. Otherwise, what you produce is just a beautiful picture, but with no sense for you. We need to reduce the size of our problem. To simulate a single heartbeat, we use as many as 800 billion variables, mathematical variables, I mean quantities. So you have to reduce this size if you want to eventually to communicate with doctors and to collaborate with doctors. And that's why these order models are very important. And we like to learn operators when this is not known, and we'll do this later on. And eventually, the holy grail is to go to real-time analysis because we want to develop digital twins. And to develop digital twins, you need to have real-time simulations. So this is the agenda after what you have seen before. And this is where we started using artificial intelligence. Right. So remember at the very beginning, I show 2 branches. The left-hand branch is the one based on numerical model. The right-hand branch is the one that I'm going to address now. So machine learning comes at this very level. To answer some of those questions. So my approach to machine learning was purely dictated by the need of answering some of those questions. So that's the picture, that's the global picture. So far we have been working with, say, till the last century with 3 pillars. The theory, the experiments, and the numerical simulations since the middle of the last, since von Neumann, since the middle of the last century. And now we have a 4th pillar, which is artificial intelligence. So how do we use it? First of all, what is artificial intelligence? For those who are completely unaware, assume that there are people here who have never been, say, dealing with artificial intelligence. But this is the pitch, right? The way I see it. So artificial intelligence is a big buzzword that I'm not going to give the definitions now, but I simply want to identify names of fields which are considered to be today addressed by artificial intelligence. Robotics, express system, computer vision, NLP, natural language processing, speech recognition, representation of knowledge, among others. Now, the machine learning is very important habilitator of artificial intelligence, in the sense that to be intelligent, a machine should be able to learn, and machine learning is the process that enables machine to learn without being explicitly programmed for that. And here you have again a lot of buzzwords, right? Techniques of machine learning, K-means, cluster regression, reinforcement learning, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, support vector machines, random forest, and some of those names actually come from statistical learning, so a classical name. Now, among the models that are used for machine learning are the neural networks. So neural networks are not the only way to have machine learning, but is perhaps today the most popular way or the most efficient way. And here, neural networks again, you have many different kinds of neural networks. In particular, you have the deep learning and the deep neural networks. And one specific example is the one of generative AI. Generative AI is the one that stands, for instance, behind ChatGPT, and which is there to create new text, new movies, new representation, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the global picture. And of course, this name artificial intelligence is there since the mid-50s of the last century, meaning 70 years. But it's only very recently that we have been experiencing this incredible success or diffusion, say. And this is basically due to three elements: big data, big supercomputers that are available to work in cloud, in particular those based on GPUs that are very efficient to carry out minimization of the loss function in the training phase, and of course algorithms. The algorithms are those based particularly on deep neural networks. Big data, because today we have very many data, and actually the last estimate I know about the number of data in the universe means in the databases of the universe is this one. That was 175 zettabyte by 2025. And zettabyte is 10 to the power 21, right? 10 to the power 21, like our century. And as saying a few days ago, just to give you an idea of how big is this big. Well, 1 zettabyte is the content of data in a HD video that runs for 36 million years. So here you have the idea of how big is this number. Right? So many data, you need big supercomputers. The largest supercomputer now has a capability of 10 to the power 18 flops per second, meaning that it can carry out billion algebraic operations per second. And of course, you need suitable algorithms. Machine learning. Machine learning, there are many definitions of machine learning, and this is one definition. It says learning is the process of transforming information into knowledge, and machine learning is automated learning. So you start from information, not to produce knowledge. And information here means data. So you have data that comes from experience, and from data you want to extract knowledge. And you want to do it in an automated way, say. And these two guys who are behind this definition are Jordan and Mitchell, two statisticians from Berkeley. And Mitchell also gave another statement where he tried to bring this definition into a more mathematical perspective. And he says that a computer program is said to learn from an experience C. Remember, experience C means data with respect to some task T. So you have a task to accomplish, you have an experience, data, and you have a performance measure P. If its performance of the computer on T, on this task, measured by P, improves your experience. So the more data you have, in principle, the more your computer will be able to learn. And learning is with respect to a specific task. And the measure of learning, or how good or how well or bad is learning, is given by P, the performance measure, basically an or, say, right? So this is the silly example, but it's useful to illustrate what's going on here. Assume that you have a problem of classification, you want to decide whether or not a picture is a picture of a dog or of a cat, say. So the task is recognize a picture and put a label, 1 if it is a dog, 0 if it is not a dog, right? So what is the experience? Experience is a number of pictures that you want to produce right? And since the supervised experience here, you yourself put a label on this picture. 1 if it's a dog, 0 if it's not a dog, right? Then you need a model, create a model. And what is a mathematical model? It's an input-output function. You go from a new picture, X, to the new label, Y or 0. And this model will depend on parameters. And you are improving your model, or you allow your computer to learn if you minimize with this a loss function with respect to those parameters. So you have a loss function, for instance, it measures the discrepancy between what the model predicts and what is the truth, say, and you minimize this, and you have so these are performance measure, and we have the optimal set of parameters mu, and therefore we have a model that will be used. And if this model is chosen correctly, then your machine would have learned how to recognize pictures of dog with respect to pictures of other elements. Okay, so this is the translation into practical terms of the general statement of Mitchell. And so you have a task, you have models, and you have minimization algorithms, and you have experience. Experience is the set of data that you have, basically. So the experience could be supervised, like in the case of the dog. For every input, you know the output. So it's a supervised learning. It could be unsupervised. You just get pictures, but you don't tell your computer if they correspond to a dog or to a bird, right? This is unsupervised. Or it could be reinforced. Reinforced meaning that the training set is the set of pictures, the set of data that you're using to train your computer. The training set is not given a priori, it's not fixed a priori. It changes dynamically during the learning process. So there are 3 different ways, 3 different approaches that are used in different contexts. All of them are used, actually. To do what? To do regression. If we have a distribution of data, you want to find, let's say, curves that describe this distribution, or to classify, like in the case of the dog or the cat, say, or to do other more sophisticated things I'm not talking about because otherwise it will take forever. Models. There are many different models. Most of them come from classical statistics, so I'll not talk about them. And one of those models is neural network. What is a neural network? Well, it's an imitation of a biological network of neurons, of biological neurons. Right? So you have neurons that are connected to axons, and each neuron is performing a specific task. And here is a representation of the task, of course, in mathematical terms. What is it doing, this mathematical machine? It's simply taking values from the neighboring neurons. So look at this picture here, representing a neural network. You have input data, the yellow one. You have output data. This is the solution, actually, right? Dog or not dog, for instance. And here are the neurons, and each neuron is performing this operation. It receives information from the left-hand neuron in this specific case. It takes linear combination with these weights, and these weights are those that will be optimized by minimizing the loss function. Then you have a bias, E, and you undergo, say, what is called an activation function, which could be 0 or 1. 0, you don't go further anymore. You don't deem this information to be relevant, so you cut it. 1, you keep it. And of course, you can regularize this stepwise function ways. So this is our neural network. Okay, so the elements that characterize the neural network are the weights and biases, coefficient Wj and B, and sigma, which is the activation function. So there are 2 elements here. One is called architecture of the neural network, as this picture here. How many layers you consider, how many neurons per layer, which kind of activation function. This is called the architecture. The other one is called the expressivity of the neural network is the way this matrix of the weights is filled, actually. If you have a single layer of neuron, it's called shallow neural network. If you have many layers, it's called deep neural networks, deep learning. Just an historical remark. The artificial neuron that you have seen before is called the perceptron. And it was proposed by Rosenblatt in 1958. But before, in 1943, so as many as 81 years ago, the first neural network was, it only received binary information and returned binary information. And the activation function was the stepwise function. So it was a kind of filters. Now, this is just pure speculation, looking at the future. Of course, those are very simple representation of the biological activity or real biological neuron. Why not put in here something, maybe modeled by PDE, which is closer to the actual behavior of the neurons, what a cell is actually doing, right? So this should be another neuron. It will show the PDE inside. It will take spikes instead of numbers and return spikes. So that would be closer to the actual activity of a neuron. Okay. I'll come back to this later on. So what is scientific machine learning is the way to combine the two things together. The digital approach that you've seen at the very beginning, and then machine learning approach. And there are many different ways you can do it to try to take advantage of the, say, somehow the synergistic feature of these two blocks. One is physics-based and the other one is machine learning-based. And just to oversimplify this very, say, complicated picture, just for the sake of time, let me try to summarize it here. Assume that you have a classical approach based on PDEs. PDEs, the finite element solver, for instance. So you have, sorry, it's not the other one. This is the, assume that you have a, this will be the second one. Assume that you have the data view, just pure machine learning, okay? You start from experimental data, the famous experience. You have a set of training data that you use to train your machine learning, and then you have a solution, okay? Now, if you know the PDE, which is behind, then you can use it in many different ways. You can use it to develop a digital model, say a finite element solver, to compute results, compute solutions that will be used to feed the training set. If you don't have enough data to train, you are supplementing those data by solutions that you obtain from your example. And that's very often the case, especially in medicine, where you have very few data. The second one is that you want to use a autoencoder, is a special encoder-decoder neural network, say, to simplify the complexity of the network. Alternatively, you can use a mathematical model, not even the numerical model, just the equations, to inform your machine learning algorithm of the physical problem which is behind. Typically, machine learning algorithms do not have any knowledge of the physical problem which is behind. They know, by definition, by construction. In this case, you want to tell them, look, we are solving a fluid dynamics problem, or look, we are solving an electrical problem for electromagnetism that is governed by Maxwell equations, and so on and so forth. So we are using this information to modify the loss function. So those are two typical, these are typical ways you can use PDEs to better inform the machine learning algorithms. Alternatively, assume that you have a classical PDE, mathematical model with numerical simulation based, say, in the Lurkin method, and then you have physical solution. You can use machine learning algorithms to produce missing data, also the coefficients for the heart. You don't know the coefficient of a single person because there is no, say, clinical image that will provide this. and you want to produce them by using machine learning algorithms. Maybe you don't know the constitutive law of a new material, right? So you want to surrogate the constitutive law by an input-output function, stress to strain, right? Or to recover a dynamics that is unknown, or to learn the operator which is behind when you don't know it. So all these are examples of, say, the help that machine learning algorithms can provide to the classical algorithms based on numerical simulation and PDE, say. I would like to tell you that by combining these two things, which is scientific machine learning, we are able to address problems of real physical interest, real clinical level. And I'm not go deeper into these applications, but just give you the names, basically. All those applications are carried out with doctors. So this is to identify the mechanisms that are behind the progression of atrial fibrillation. And atrial fibrillation, a very big disturbance of the rhythm of the atria. If you don't break it, you may have very serious troubles because your heart is not able to behave in a regular manner and then to eject the right amount of blood. So can we characterize the slow conduction corridors which are responsible for the self-sustainment of this fibrillation? And we do it by the electrophysiology. This is in collaboration with the Johns Hopkins Hospital, and we want to show doctors that even if the problem is a problem of heart rhythm, so it's considered to be an electrical problem, when you use an electromechanical mathematical model, you can provide results that are much more accurate. They can reveal behavior that otherwise would not be caught. So the nature is actually multi-physics, and this goes much beyond this specialization of the different doctors. That's another example. This is a hypertrophic ventricle. It means that it's growing too much. It's too thick, right? In particular, the septum, which is the part that separates the left heart from the right heart, is becoming too thick. And this will be opposed to the opening, will contrast the opening of the aortic valve. So the aortic valve will not be able to open completely. So there is not enough, say, space for blood to leave the left ventricle. So you need to operate. How do you operate? You remove part of the septum. How much you remove? Well, this is an optimal shape design seen from a mathematical perspective. So we carry out optimal shape design for a fluid structure interaction problem, and you identify the region that you have to, say, cut in the septum. This is TAVI. TAVI is a trans-aortic valve implant. This is the aortic valve when it does not work any longer, which happens very often. You can avoid having an open surgery, an open heart surgery. You enter through the, say, typically the femoral artery, and you put a valve, artificial valve, in place. And the point is, how do you estimate? Since this is a new procedure, it's very, very popular because it costs relatively little with respect to opening the heart, the chest. It's a low cost, meaning of the order of $20,000 just, or that you say. So how can you predict the future behavior of this implant? There is very little statistics. So we try to use, again, fluid structure interaction to predict the success and to develop new indicators to predict the success of this operation over the years, say. And this is a funny problem. Once a doctor came and said, well, for the perfusion, remember the perfusion is the process by which the coronaries will feed our myocardium. Well, when you want to see the way the blood, the heart is perfused, you take a guy, you put it on the cyclet, and he start or she start cycling under different level of effort, and then doctor take a ecography and they see the way the whole stuff is perfused. Right. So this is, first of all, is a bit dangerous because when you increase the level, you cannot know the level this poor guy will react. The second is that it should be with a liquid of contrast, which is toxic. So can we, this is the question, can you provide a mathematical model that will replace the cyclet, namely simulate the cyclet, all this in a virtual lab? This is what we did, and then we compare the result with the actual experimental.
Hello.
Yeah,
لا أستاذ عجب السمك صباح النور، وش رايك؟
Not that, yeah.
من هذاك
Merci. So this is another example where you actually can use mathematics to replace the actual physics. I was saying that, and I'm about to conclude. I still have 5 minutes, right? 55. To conclude, the next step is digital twin. And digital twin is actually an old name that was proposed by a NASA engineer, John Vickers, in 1012. And this is original picture. Of course, in that case, it has the virtual space and real space from a rock, and you wanted to actually have a simulator that was not only a simulator, but not only a digital representation, but also capable of having a dialogue with the real stuff and controlling the real stuff. And this is the way that mathematically this should be regarded, right? The digital twin is between the physical object, whatever it is, and our numerical method, which is often based on simple machine learning, and it exchanges continuous information. So the physical object through sensors, for instance, send information to the digital model. Here you solve PDEs in real time, in this case, and the PDEs send control to the physical object. So this is the physical model. There are very few realization of digital models. Here is just our first realization, still to be certified, but it's very simple problem in cardiac simulation, and it has to see with hypertension. See, when you have blood pressure which is too high, can you control a guy in an automatic way that has a pressure that is too high? So that's the way it works. You have data. First of all, you have to calibrate your model for the specific person, and this is something that you do offline, once and for all. Then you may provide additional quantities by further measure, by patient treatment. But then when you have this, then you can set a dialogue at every time. And of course, depending upon the technology that you use to get data. If it is a smartwatch, it will be seconds. If it is the digital monitor, it will be minutes. If it is a periodic health check, it will be days. So the time will be dictated by the technology that is actually implanted on the person, say, right? And here is the way you can proceed by setting up a digital model, and eventually, for every time, providing very important quantities, AP, the systolic arterial pressure, the AP is the systolic arterial pressure. You know that when you measure pressure, you have two values, one for the systolic peak, the other one is for the diastolic peak. And then the systemic resistance, which is very important because it measures the stiffness of the artery, and the systemic venous resistance, so arterial and venous. And on the basis of these results, of course, you can activate your patient or your administration, hospital administration, and try to set up a continuous, say, exchange of information and control. Concluding remarks. How far are we from a real intelligence, from a human intelligence, or artificial intelligence? Of course, these are very synthetic. Well, we are still very far, and we are facing every day basically what is known as being the Moravec paradox, according to which things that are easy for humans, like memory, common sense, reasoning, hierarchical planning, are very difficult for AI, and vice versa, right? So if you are in a complementary mode, right? And here are some examples, right? Take a 10-year-old child, can learn how to roll the dishwasher in a few minutes, but we don't have a robot that's capable of doing that, in my knowledge. And we are discussing over lunch with Olivier and the other colleagues. Any 18-year-old guy can learn how to drive a car with just, say, 20 hours, roughly speaking, of practice, right? But we still have a very, level 5 autonomous driving is still in very infancy. So we don't have yet in our streets a car which is completely autonomous, say. This is the statement. It's relatively easy to get computers to perform at an adult level of intelligence test or in the game of checkers, but very difficult or even impossible to endow them with the abilities of 1-year-old child in terms of perception and mobility. So these are kind of synthetic remarks. Another remark I'd like to make is that off-the-shelf solutions do not exist, so they're an illusion. So you believe that you have a difficult problem, you want to just go on the shelf and pick up the right tool to solve your problem, an artificial intelligence algorithm, forget it. This is my experience, goal-oriented. What do you want to solve? Pick up a problem, pick up a question that you want to answer to, and then develop an AI algorithm to give this answer. And this is pretty much governed by domain experience. So if you don't have domain experience, we are lost. Here again is kind of overstatement, right? Is the title of my mini course, from problem setting to problem solving. We have been trained as scientists to problem solving, right? How to solve a problem in the engineering community, okay? Which is fine. In my understanding, this should be more and more replaced by artificial intelligence, the problem solving. The real problem is problem setting. How do you set the question? And how do you create your dialogue with the machine? This is what is called, when you use ChatGPT, is called prompt engineering, right? The prompt is the prompt that you see, and prompt engineering is a new field, and you have to be good in asking the right question. If you do not ask the right question, and you try to have the right dialogue, you get irrelevant results. So asking the right question for a complex problem means being good mathematician, good physicist, good engineers, knowing the knowledge, knowing the field, right? So problem setting is extremely important to take advantage of the AI technology. There are still many problems open in mathematics for artificial neural networks. Here are some of those. There are still many problems open for, say, an AI society, problems with safety, with security, with privacy, responsibility, with sustainability, because those networks are using immense amount of resources. There is a lack of governance at the supranational level, lack of transparency of reproducibility of algorithms, concentration among a few key players, as you know, the big tech company, they own the data, problem with the jurisdiction, confidentiality, problem of training. There are very, very few people trained for doing that, right? I mean, the gap between the offer and the demand of job is extremely high today. You have limitation. Okay, this is a bit too philosophical. Maybe we're facing a limitation soon, limitation of digital computers, the phenomenon computers. That's why some people are thinking of different kinds of computers, like biocomputers, quantum computers, or maybe neuromorphic computers, where, as I said before, use neural networks. Here's a digital computer with neural networks, and every neuron is replaced by a biological neuron, not in the physical sense, but in the mathematical sense, by a mathematical model for a biological neuron, say, who know. And the very last thing is we need a better democratization. What does that mean? We hope that this revolution, as all the previous revolution, will create benefit for the entire society, which is not yet the case, as you know. Actually, the risk is to have a gap, and that the gap will become bigger and bigger between those who are taking advantage and those who are somehow passively suffering about this. And I would like to close with, say, about this democratization issue by a sentence that I found carved in the marble in the Washington, D.C. Roosevelt Memorial. Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was the president of the United States during the Second World War, and he said, and this is from 1945, the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, but whether we provide enough for those who have too little. So I believe that this is very important, especially in this very time where this revolution has actually the potential of creating a lot of benefit, but these benefits should go hopefully to many and not to very few. Thank you very much. So these are a few papers on this.
Thank you, Alfio, for this wonderful presentation of all your work and also the opening, the key issue at the end that may nourish the things we have to say about this artificial intelligence. Are there questions, comments? Up, Albert.
already defining particular artificial intelligence about a task. You learn from experiments and you understand how you improve the performance. So in your case, what is your definition of performance exactly? And, how do you measure?
Well, performance is the way you measure the success of your network on the training set. So you start from the training set, you use it to train your machine. Your machine will learn, and learning means finding a model when you optimize the parameters, right? And the performance is the way, the criteria that you use to find the parameters. So it's the discrepancy between, in the way you measure the difference between what your model function, neural network predict, and what is the truth.
Yeah, but the truth precisely, I mean,
This is supervised learning. The truth is when you start and you know the answer, right? And you're the training set, take the case of the dog, for instance.
I'm not sure because this is here you just involve the training set, but you need some validation.
Very good.
At some point.
Okay.
So what is your validation?
Excellent. So you have basically you have 3 sets. Assume that you have 1,000 pictures. Again, in case of the dog, right? It's available, not taken. You take 500 for the training set, and you keep 500 for the testings. Right? So your performance will regard the training set as well. So those features, the way you perform on those features, they cannot be used for the training. And then you have the third set in B, typically, which is called the validation set. So your performance measure can be used in many different ways. That's up to you.
But I was really, I mean, in your cardio, in your specific application.
In my specific application, the point is that it's not like having 1,000 features. It's having 1,400 measures of a real patient. So I use some of them to train and other for testing. What's the question?
I have a question about the statistical aspect and how you point out that you have got a knowledge, but how you are warranting. Is there a way to say, okay, I have enough data from station,
Okay.
and they are representative of different feature because you may miss a point or you have something which is new in cardiology, and how this is handled?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I completely cut all this part of analysis. Say, and you have some criteria that are used, and you start having some theorems where you measure the accuracy and the expressivity. Expressivity means the way you can generalize from your training set to something that we're not seen in the training set, and the accuracy is measure of the error. And you have several elements that play here. One is the cardinality of the training set. The other one is the Vapnik-Chernensky's measure, which is basically a number, a natural number, which tells you how many elements at most you can consider in your training set that can be separated by a linear function. Say, is the second point. And then you have another element that characterizes what is called the hypothesis space. The hypothesis space is what's called the subspace where we are looking for your neural network, for your models. So these 3 elements enter into this analysis, and you have at least asymptotically an indication on how to choose them, or say, depending upon what you have, what kind of error you should expect.
Jean-Pierre, tu as une question? It was almost the same question, but I got another one. Okay, you have data of a certain time, and you train your model. Then you lose, for example, in heart disease, you have some of the patients that have some disease, but not all. So you capture disease that are not in the training set.
Okay, that's a very good question. This is a dream. This is a dream, right? The point is, want to answer the question why. And answering question why is extremely important and extremely difficult. Mathematicians typically answer the question why not. You for counterexample, we're very good in speaking. Very good in finding counterexamples, but in that case, you know what is the ground truth. You have a theorem, you have a statement, you want to find the counterexample. Okay. Here you don't have the theorem. You don't have the conjecture, right? You don't know where certain, I mean, these that diagonal, right? But you can measure what is happening, but you don't know why is that happening. Okay. So we are not there. I wonder if you can get there soon. I don't know. I don't think so. But my objective is much less ambitious than that. I have a goal. And my goal is that I want to provide that type of answer. And that type of answer could have see with a specific pathology, not all the possible pathologies, and try to train my neural network and find my training set, which is suitable to provide an answer to them. Create a model which is good for answers to that. That's why I was calling goal-driven. So you cannot be too ambitious in this context, not yet. And that's why human intelligence is also intuition, right? And intuition here can play a very important role. You cannot pretend those machines and those algorithms to express any form of intuition. There was a question. Wait, Lucas?
Yes, so for the talk, so when solving a PDE with machine learning neural networks, do you think you can get always arbitrarily close to the true solution, assuming it exists and it's well identified? Or is there something like unexpected error that is very hard to overcome?
Well, but two remarks. The first one is that, and I think I insisted a bit during my mini course on this point. If you know the PDE and you have a single shot problem, then you want to solve that problem, right? In my knowledge, there is nothing that can beat a standard Galerkin finite element method. If you know the PDE and you know that it's numerical method are suitable for that PDE. So this is not the name of the game here, right? The name of the game is when you have a multi-query problem, so optimization or inverse problem. So you have to solve it repeatedly, and then using the classical Galerkin method could be extremely costly. The name of the game is when you don't have enough data to feed your PDE, and therefore you want to use surrogate models and so on and so forth. What kind of accuracy can you achieve? You start getting some results, some error estimates, but we're very far from having error estimates that resemble those that we have in finite elements, for instance, standard Galerkin methods. Is there an intrinsic limitation? I don't think so, because the neural networks, by construction, especially deep neural network, can construct subspaces of functions that are good enough in representing any arbitrary C0 function. This is a classical result of the 80s by a Russian guy. And you start getting more elaborated results where you assume that your ground truth function behind your data has a certain sort of regularity. In that case, you can see that you can actually improve on the accuracy. So I do not believe there is a limitation, a virtual limitation. The point is that worthwhile being used? And this depends on the context.
Très bien. On va peut-être arrêter. Merci à nouveau à tous. On peut bien faire des questions. On peut se retrouver dans la rotonde. Le laboratoire vous offre un cours pour célébrer la fin de ces leçons.
On va arrêter.